All right, welcome back to another episode of Wellness Unplugged. This is our live broadcast podcast. That's what I like to call it. And I've got an amazing guest with me today. In fact, they're all amazing. But I feel a little bit of kinship with Marc here because Marc has also lost over 100 pounds, which is pretty incredible. He did that while also being a full-time law enforcement professional, which is a high-stress job, as well as being a dad to two kids and a husband. And so we want to tap into kind of Marc's story here and learn more about how he went from being 100 pounds overweight and kind of hating his life to mastering his life and now being a major inspiration to other professionals as well. So welcome to the show, Marc.
I appreciate it, Coach John. Thank you for having me, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So you are a law enforcement officer in LAPD.
Correct. Yeah, I'm about 19 years on. I'm a Sergeant 2 right now for the department.
Okay. Second largest police department in the continental United States. Mm-hmm. I suppose now as at a sergeant level, are you more in an administrative position or do you still spend time out on the streets, or what's it like for you there?
I'm in more of an administrative, investigative section right now. Every once in a while, they do let me go out in the streets, especially if we have like a riot or we have some protests and stuff, which kind of happens pretty often. I'm behind the scenes most of the time.
Yeah. So from the time that you spent on the streets, I imagine you saw a lot of things that the average person doesn't see. And maybe I could ask, it seems like there's a degree of hostility towards law enforcement in general, which is kind of, to me, it's a shame because I have a world of respect for everybody who puts on a uniform. I spent 6 years serving in the Navy kind of thing. Is it really as hostile as the media would make it out to be? Or do you still find that the average person is actually fairly respectful and appreciative of what you do?
That's a great question. First off, John, thank you very much for your service for 6 years. I mean, it's a big deal. Are people as aggressive as the media makes it out to be? And the answer is no. I've found too many people, not too many, a lot of people who are just like you, who are just like, hey, we really appreciate it, what it is that you do. But for the most part, it is the people who are the loudest that seem to be what everybody like focuses their attention on, right? So it's like, oh my God, look at it. But in reality, it's not. I actually remember last, I think it was like May or June, not this May or June, but the May or June before that, we had a riots in Los Angeles. Yeah. And I remember being on the line, people coming up to me, telling me things about my kids and my mom and all this stuff I didn't even know, I'd never met them before. Yeah. And it was funny because as soon as they walked by, I had a citizen who came by and under his breath, he's like, hey, we can't really say anything. We don't want to become like the victim, but we want to say just how much we appreciate you for protecting us, for taking that from what that guy was just saying to you and not doing anything, not responding, not reacting to any of that. I just want to tell you that there's a lot of us who are out here, but we just don't want to be victimized. So we can't really say anything, but we want to say, thank you for what it is you do. Yeah. And so that's something that happens a lot, but the media doesn't capture that. Yes. It's all like the negativity and all that kind of stuff. It's out there and we've got to make sure that we're like, our head is on a swivel, but at the same time, we don't want to think that it's all like that, because whenever you go into the box of everything's all like this, you're putting like that tag on something and it's never an all or nothing thing. Yeah.
You're not moving into a very good headspace there. And it's unfortunate that very often like a couple of bad apples or bad incidences, especially in our modern media environment where we want to get clicks, we want to make people emotional, we want to draw attention. So we're going to highlight the most outrageous things that occur. And very rarely do we get to see some of like the really awesome day-to-day interactions. And I've spent time living in third world countries. And what I can say is to live in a first world country with a professional police force is something that a lot of countries could only wish to have. I've lived in countries with incompetent and corrupt police who are only there to collect a paycheck and then basically stay out of harm's way. And you don't feel very safe. And I can tell you, I'm very grateful that I live in a country with, by and large, a very professional police force. And I think the same thing is true across the border. So I want to dive a little bit into your personal story here. What actually prompted you to get into policing or law enforcement? Why were you drawn to that?
That's a great question. So my dad was also a police officer. And so what he would do is he would ask us questions. He would tell us about things that were happening on duty, when he got an opportunity to help people, when he was involved with like crazy situations. And I craved it all the time. So anytime that he was there and we were like driving somewhere in the car, I had me and my younger brother.
Yep.
my dad would be like asking us questions. Okay, like if you were in this situation, what would you guys do? Would you do this or that? And it was just like this game that we would answer like questions and penal code sections and all this. So it was just really exciting to me. And so I was like, you know what, when I get older, that is exactly what I want to do. Like, it just seems like every day is fun. Every day is like a new thing that you get to experience. You get to help people and do all these kind of things. And so it was kind of from an early age that I kept seeing that over and over and over again. So that's when I was like, okay, this is what I want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So thinking about some of the time that you might have spent on the street and undoubtedly you've made arrests and things like that, do you ever feel a sense of, I guess, sympathy or compassion, maybe for the individual that you end up arresting? You're like, something must have gone wrong in this person's life, or, what's that kind of experience like?
100%. You can't take anything for face value. So you go to, like, let's say a domestic violence and you arrest somebody, like there's something that happened, whether it's something in their past, whether that's something that's like under the surface. And I always like to get curious to find out what that thing is, or at least to examine it, because like nobody's born like with the idea of like, they're just going to go out and either they're going to be racist or they're going to hurt people or they're going to hit people or they're going to hurt so nobody was ever born that way. And so I like to believe that like every human is like created equally, and like something went awry there, maybe something they witnessed, maybe some trauma, maybe something else. And so I don't like to take it just for face value. Like, oh, this person's going to jail, so they must be a bad person. No, that's not it. It's just that their behavior caused them to get there. Right.
Yeah.
And so just kind of understanding that. And of course, understanding life coaching philosophies has helped too, because understanding how the brain works and the reasons why people do that, and the fact that they react to outside circumstances rather than take a second to like really think about what it is they're going to do beforehand. I kind of see how they can put themselves in that situation. But yeah, I do get very curious about that, because I know that, like I said, people aren't just born that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's so interesting you put it that way, because I've actually shared that too in kind of my own personal story, being violently attacked and assaulted. And part of the way that I moved past that was actually learning how to forgive those who did that to me. And it wasn't that I saw them again, but I cultivated a sense of compassion for them, because I wanted to take a step back and say, what must have happened in their life that they saw me as something worthy to be killed? Because that was their intent. Hurt people. And so it's not to absolve them of the behavior, but to recognize that like, it probably wasn't really actually about me. In fact, I'd say it wasn't about me, and I think that's a really sort of powerful thing to recognize. Now, over the course of maybe being in this career, you found yourself about 100 pounds overweight. Now, is this something, did you ever struggle with your weight as a teenager, or is this something that kind of happened as you kind of became a professional and navigating life as a police officer?
So when I started to have struggles with my health, was actually before I got on the police department. So basically, when I was had finished high school, I went into college, and I was going to college, working full time, working like crazy at unpredictable schedules and all that kind of stuff. Got into video games, got into like convincing myself that it wasn't that I didn't have any time to exercise, and then going and playing like 7 or 8 hours straight of video games, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yep.
And that's kind of where I got out of whack, and I ended up getting to be 100 pounds overweight. And then I know I interviewed you in my podcast a couple of minutes ago. It was like this. It was like lose 40, gain 30, lose 30, gain 40. And it was like this up and down thing. And it was like, for me, it was always like, I was putting blame on the things outside of myself, right?
Yeah.
The lack of time, the stress that I had, having to go to college, having to do all of these kind of things. And when you put blames on the outside, like, you don't have any control over making yourself lose the weight and then keeping it off, because now it's like you have something, you can put the blame game out there. So it wasn't until I started to take ownership of that gave me the ability of changing it.
Right. So it's because it's very tempting, and even there's a degree of comfort to be found in victimhood. And we can even use victimhood as a way to get sympathy from people, like, oh, I'm just trying so hard, I just can't seem to get anywhere. These forces are acting against me that stop me from being able to do this. How did you kind of break free from that victim mindset? Was there a process?
Oh, there was absolutely a process. So I personally had to hit rock bottom, and I would tell people that if they can, that they could use other people's rock bottom as their starting point, because doing it personally, it hurt a lot. My son was born 1 pound, 9 ounces. So he was born at 27 weeks. I could fit him in my hand. And he had to spend 73 days in the NICU. And so when you have your firstborn and, you have the crib and everything set up at home and you have to leave your baby in the NICU and you have to go home with your wife without a kid, like I wasn't physically ready because I still wasn't good when it comes to my health, but I wasn't mentally ready for that. Like I wasn't prepared to control or to think about like, what do I do next? And so I had like a breakdown. So much so that I had to go see a therapist on our police department. Like we have the most amazing police psychologists that like literally transform my life by just asking me powerful questions and getting me to come to find those answers myself. And that was really that moment where I was like, okay, like this is much more deeper than just me. Like I literally had let my son down because he needed me the most then. And I was emotionally broken down and I couldn't show up like I wanted to. And he didn't get to pick his dad. So I get to choose what I eat, what I exercise, what I fuel this with, right? If I'm growing or not. And by doing that, like I could take full control of that. I'd lose the weight. And of course I ended up keeping it off, but I would be the dad that I always wanted to be. And that was kind of like that driver is like, for me, it's my family. So whenever you ask me a question in terms of like, if how do I get myself to show up? It always involves my family. I ask myself a question like, how does becoming successful over here make me better for my family? And I'm like, oh, okay. So then I will show up repeatedly over and over because that's a purpose-based question for me.
I'm like, have you been reading my life story? So I was born at 26 weeks. I was born at home, and this was back in 1982. So this was, and I had to spend the first 9 weeks of my life in intensive care in NICU as well. So it's very interesting to hear that perspective because I think about what my parents went through, and I heard the story many times, but I don't think I ever really fully let it sink in and appreciate like what it took to why I'm even here today, And so shout out to mom and dad if you're watching this.
Big time.
Yeah. And the other part of it is you talked about what I refer to as an emotionally compelling reason. And so there's a phrase in sales that say people buy an emotion, justify on logic. Mm-hmm. We can, and it really, I think it's true in anything. Like you could be basically buying into, I will take part in this process because I believe it will help me to be successful. Mm-hmm. We need that emotionally compelling reason because it's going to be uncomfortable. So we have this tension between like our primal nervous system and who we are as a human being, this desire for growth versus desire for safety and comfort. Mm-hmm. And I'm in the exact same boat. My emotionally compelling reason is I look at my son and I go, I don't want to be a sideline dad. I want to be physically active in his life. And that's what gets me out of bed and making myself uncomfortable because I want to be able to be present in his life. So you went through this process of yo-yo dieting up and down. Was there a point where you felt like you weren't going to be able to lose the weight, where you wanted to just give up and say, look, I guess it's just my destiny in life to be fat or overweight or whatever language you used?
1,000 times, 1,000 times, because every time I thought that, it like literally took the pressure off of me because I was like, you know what? I can't do it. I can't do it. I mean, it's just not possible for me. I'm big boned. It hurts too much. I don't have time. I've got to support my family. This is a big one I hear from law enforcement officers. Yeah. Like I've got to put a roof over my kid's head, thinking that you have to do that or you can be healthy. Like there's not a decision. There's both. Yeah. You could decide both, but it really like lets the pressure off when you say, well, it's just not possible. And so, yes, I did that repeatedly until I did what it was like the most impactful thing for me. And that was I connected with a team of people that had very similar values as me, who were not willing to let me give up. And when we were functioning as a team, it just basically got us all to like level up. And basically we were able to like, because of our group expectations, we were able to rise to a level that we could have never done on our own. And by doing that, it got me to show up over time.
That's powerful because the stories that we tell ourselves, I don't have time is a really, really big one because of work or whatever. But we would be shocked at how much time we waste every single day. And that's not to try to put guilt on anybody's shoulders, but if we were to actually keep account of our time, it would be surprising. So I talk about a process called CMGs, or can't miss goals. And what I'm referring to here is we set a small, like micro goal that we basically can do every single day, even on our worst day. Now you can always build on it. You could always do more, but there's a certain minimum. The other term is BAM, or bare ass minimum. That's not my own, so CMG is my own. So, but what dictates the success of a habit is its repeatability. And ultimately, if we realize we're building a pattern of behavior, and so it's like you may not have started, working out 5 days a week for 60 minutes or something like that. You might have started with something a little bit simpler that you could keep doing, and then you kind of build on that behavior.
Mm-hmm.
You talk a lot about mindset. And because people would, I guess they would see you now if they go to, Leo Family Fitness, and they see like you're in fantastic physical shape, you're in your 40s, you're in great shape, you're an amazing dad, an amazing husband, and I imagine that you're also an amazing leader with your men at the LAPD as well. So they would look at that and go like, I don't know if I could ever be that. And they would treat it like maybe you have something that they don't, some quality that they don't. And what would you say to people who might think that way?
Oof, that's a great question. First off, thank you very much for those kudos. I greatly appreciate it. I try to be a good dad, a good leader, and a good husband every single day, but I also screw it up like everybody else. So
yeah,
I would say that we all have a before picture. And if you take a look at my before picture, you'd see me 100 pounds overweight, but you wouldn't see all of the other disasters that I had created in my life.
Yeah.
Like so many of the things that people pay me for and pay me lots of money for right now is because I've screwed it up so many times that like I was at that point that you're at right now. Like, I mean, I can't tell you, I was giving it all to my career. I was not giving anything to my family the way I should have. I was not trying to be a good dad. I thought, like when they give you the baby at the hospital and they're like, oh, okay, you can take them home now. I thought you just figured it out on your own. Like I didn't realize that just like I go to school for an academy to become a police officer, I need to do that for my own, becoming a better father and a better husband too. Right. And so when I look at the person that I was before, yes, the outside has changed, but nothing has changed more than the inside. What my mentor says, our outward success is an expression of our inner growth.
Yeah.
So our outward success is an expression of our inner growth. So if you're not there now, it doesn't have anything to do with outside. It has to do with how can I grow inside? And I can tell you from the person that's in those before pictures that if you follow me on social media, you've seen them. Like, yes, he was way overweight, but there were so many other things, so many other areas that he really needed to focus on. And like you said, I picked one. My first one was my health and fitness. And when I got that under control, I'm like, okay, how can I be a really great husband? And then I dove into that. I became a part of a mastermind. I like literally did all the things I did over here. And then I'm like, how can I create a business around that? And then I did the same things. I dove into a mastermind. I dove into reading. I dove into mentors. And then I'm like, how can I be a better father? And it's repeat. You repeat what you learn from the principles over here that you've succeeded in, and you move it over here. It's not as hard as we make it to believe, right? It's kind of like that thought of like, I don't have time. It makes you feel like, it's okay. Then I'll have to put in the hard work. Yeah. But that's the same thing too. Like if you own this area, you're like, hey, I can move everything over here. And it's just, it's like all these universal principles actually apply over here.
They do.
So, I mean, basically, I guess summing this up is like, I know exactly what you're talking about because I felt that way too. I was exactly there too. I had given up many, many, many other times before, but there was something that was different that was triggered in me when it was my son that was being affected by my actions. My laziness actually affected him. And when I could pinpoint that in my brain, I'm like, never again. And then from there, it got easier. I'm not going to say that it was easy because I know you losing 100 pounds, you don't lose 100 pounds easy. All right. No. There's still days you don't wake up. There's still, or your alarm goes off and you don't hit the snooze button or you eat something bad or I'm still to this day, I'll wake up or I'll do something that I know I'm like, man, why did I do that? But now I know because I know how the brain works. Beating myself up about it is not the solution. Instead, like figuring out like, how can I become better next time? What can I learn? How can I grow? What's something new tactic or technique that I could learn to get better and better and better? And that's what it's about. It's not comparing yourself, but seeing what you can do to get better every single day.
Yeah. So you talked about beating up yourself. And I often say to people, if it was going to work, it would have worked by now. Mm-hmm. Why do you think we fall into this pattern of beating ourselves up?
That's a great question. I think we all have this deep feeling that we're not enough, that we're unworthy. We're not good enough to succeed. And when we have like evidence that we think, and here's the thing, it's not evidence to prove that we're unworthy. It's we're deciding that that's the story we want that thing to mean. Something happens on the outside and we're like, oh, this must mean I'm not good enough, right? Yeah. And our natural reaction is to talk negatively to ourselves, right? It's just it's like our limiting beliefs over and over and over and over again. And what I can tell you is like being a life coach, being a health and fitness coach, like over 9 years now, there's no positive thing that will ever happen in your life for beating yourself up. Yeah. Like we have this thought of like, oh, it's going to get me to show up better next time. No, it's not. It's not. It can't. Like beating yourself up, saying I should have done this, I should have done that is going to only create you taking additional negative actions, and it's going to create additional negative results in your life. So giving yourself that grace and saying, okay, I messed that up. What is it trying to teach me? Right. I think you talked about it on the podcast too. Like when we have problems, those are like little people waving at you going, hey, over here, pick me. Yeah. Do something about me. I'm kind of like evidence that maybe something needs to be done differently. And so that's what I choose to believe is like when things don't go right, instead of beating myself up, I'm like, hey, what's the lesson here that I need to learn?
Yeah. I even kind of get excited about it. I'm like, all right, I get to learn a lesson, because I would say like I was abusive towards myself, and that sounds like very strong language, but the things I said in the privacy of my own head, I would never utter to another human being. And a part of me feels like it's kind of a way of paying a penance for the crime, if you could put it that way. Like, I did something bad, but now I've punished myself. That gets me off the hook for that behavior instead of actually resolving the behavior. So sometimes beating myself up was like actually a cop-out. It was a way of not actually dealing with the problem, and it becomes a habit. But I picture this. So imagine every day, if I go to my son and I say, you suck and you're never going to be good enough. Every day, that's the messaging I give him. What kind of man is he going to grow up to be if that's all he hears? I mean, it already hurts my heart to think about it, because I love him so much that like I would never ever use that language towards him. And when we realize that we actually need to cultivate that degree of love for ourselves, which especially as men, is a really unusual thing to say. So I wonder if you could share some thoughts on kind of self-love and self-compassion. And is that compatible with our ideas around masculinity?
Oh, that's a great question. I think it's a must. I think it's absolutely a must. If you want to get to a better place, if you want to get better, if you want to take the right actions or become that person that you want to become, like the first step is to think about what I like to coin as my heart voice. It's like the voice of love, of potential, of hope, of purpose, of like all of those great things that, like, if we were to talk to our kids, we would talk to them, right? If they came up to us and said, hey, would this be possible? We would be like 1000%. I'll be right with you. Like, I will be right next to you while you do that. But then we think the same things about ourselves. It's our head voice that comes up and says, oh, well, you're too old. You're too this, you're too that. Right. And so I'm totally like, I'm all for giving myself compassion, because I know that that's going to give me the stepping stone that I can bounce off of to actually become the person that I want to become. And what's even more important, like, and this is once again, going back to my family, is when I do that, I model the behavior for my kids to do to themselves. Because if I'm talking trash to myself and my son thinks I'm a superhuman dad, right? He's a police officer. He's my dad. He's so awesome. But yet I'm beating myself up, even if it's internally. Your kids know. Let me trust me. Your kids know. But if you're saying it out loud, what are they going to think about themselves? And so for me, I'm like, okay, like I'll do this for myself, but really I will 100% do it for him, because I know that I don't want him to be talking to himself like that either. Yeah.
Being a parent is, my brother said to me, like, when you hold your kid for the first time, you'll feel something change inside you, like almost physically. And I will never forget that moment. Like they handed him over to me, and I'm just looking at his little eyes, looking up at me. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real. There's no going back from this. And and so I feel like sometimes there's an element of projection that takes place, and this is why I think self-love is so important, because the opposite of it is we will take how we feel about ourselves, we will project that onto other people and assume they feel the same way about us, and then actually will start to harm or hurt the relationships we have. You talked about being like striving to be a good dad and a good husband. And I have no doubt you're actually excellent at both of those, but you're also humble in terms of, but what does it look like in your eyes to be, so let's say, a good husband, for example, while you're trying to balance being a dad and being a professional?
That's awesome. That's a great question. I love your questions, Coach John. So for me, it's about intentionality. That's really what it's about. Because here's the thing. I have learned a lot over the last 2 years, really trying to become the best father and best husband that I possibly can. And a lot of it has to do with just being intentional in the moments that you do have. So many times I know dealing with police officers who are like working crazy shifts. They're like, well, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough energy and whatnot. And I like to ask them, like, okay, when you do have that time, what kind of things are you doing with your kids? Or what kind of conversations are you having with your wife? Because here's the thing, like, I can have a conversation or even just sit in front of the TV with my kids, watching a movie for 2 hours. or I can have a 15 to 20 minute like walk with them where I'm asking them questions that are deeper than just how's your day? Because everybody's like, oh, how's your day? That's okay. But what if I asked them something like, hey, what made you smile today?
Yeah,
Now they're like,
love that.
because now he's like, okay, something must have made me smile. What is it? And now he's like getting involved in the conversation, just asking him more questions about that. Why do you think that made you smile? Like, what are you most excited about, tomorrow? Or was there something you did today that you failed at that maybe you learned? And just like asking questions like this gets you into a deep conversation and deeper connection. So I'm all about like being intentional. Now I do schedule in time where I'm not doing anything, right? Because I want to make sure that I can rest, recover. My brain has a chance to think. Like I'll go out on a walk by myself. But on those other times, I'm like, okay, how can I make this time like really count and be just super intentional? So I have a great conversation starter with my wife. I actually have a list of questions that I ask, like 25 different questions. And I just continue to, as I'm going throughout the day, I'll like pick and grab one that I hear like from other people. Because once again, I'm still surrounding myself with other people who are trying to be better fathers and better husbands. And we kind of share that with each other. And having those questions like just creates this different sort of connection rather than just, oh, how was your day? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. I love that. I'm like making note of them. Like, cool. I'd like you to email me those questions after we're done recording.
Absolutely.
So I think there's this idea that when we invest in ourselves, so when we start investing our time into our health and bettering ourselves, that it's selfish and other people in our life lose. Did you ever encounter feelings like that? And the people that you work with, do you feel that resistance? Like if I take time for myself, it is selfish and others in my life will lose. And what might you say to them?
I mean, if I was talking to myself, I know that would be a cop out, right? Because that's a easy way to get into your comfort zone. Because whenever you try and learn or take on or do something or become the person that you want to become, it's not going to happen when you're comfortable, right? And so when we start to take those steps, when we start to take that next action that we have to take, our brain is going to come in and try and self-sabotage, right? It wants you to stay the same, wants you to stay safe, wants you to be over here. So and so you're literally going to try and talk yourself out of it a million different ways. My brain is really smart at that. It has some amazing limiting beliefs, and it will tell me all the reasons why this thing doesn't apply to me. I'm not going to succeed and everything like that. And so when you think about that stuff, everybody knows like the whole oxygen mask thing, right? You got to put on your oxygen mask first. But here's the thing. Every time that you don't invest in yourself, you're not showing up as the best version of you for everybody else.
Yes.
So you're letting people down by default.
Yeah.
And so when you realize that, like I'm actually letting people down by default, anytime that I'm not investing in myself, it kind of, for me, helps me and the people that I coach do a complete 180. Because here's the thing, if you take that time, energy, money, whatever, and you invest it in yourself, there's nothing that will not be touched by your growth. Like they say it's personal growth. It's not personal growth until it affects every area of your life. And when you start to focus on personal growth, you start to like really just develop into that next version. You take it as a police sergeant. You take it into your relationships at home. You take it into every area, your health, your fitness, your business, right? I have a business. It like literally transcends everything. And when you start to realize that, you're like, holy smokes, how much more can I invest in myself so I can even be better for these other areas? And it just does this complete 180. But yes, our brains will try and trick us out of taking any kind of action. And if it says, oh, you're going to be selfish, that's very easy. It's a play on you. And you're like, oh yeah, I don't want to do that. Right. I want to make sure I put everybody else first. But in reality, you're not showing up for anybody nearly as good as you could.
Yeah. It's the metaphor of pouring from empty glass, essentially. Investing in yourself is filling your cup. And then I like the idea of abundance being filling your cup, and then the overflow spills over and you share the overflow with everybody else. So they're actually getting the absolute best. And I picture like this really nice, like wine goblet and so on. Right. And they're getting this high quality wine. You talked about limiting beliefs. And again, so you're a successful, you have a successful career. You also have a business as a coach and a life coach. And again, we go back to people will look at you and maybe they might get the impression like you're doing phenomenally well in life, but they might get the impression that like you have no struggles or no challenges that you face. And you said limiting beliefs. Do you still have limiting beliefs that come up, and how do you deal with them?
Man, I think I've said 1000% a bunch of times. Yes, I have limiting beliefs, and they're always there.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you a little bit about how I deal with them in a second. But my deep limiting belief is I'm not enough.
Yeah.
I'm not enough.
I feel that one.
That's a limiting belief that I've had ever since I was younger. And I had to do so many things to like protect my brother, to be like the man of the house while my dad wasn't there. There were so many things that led up to that. Knowing that I have that limiting belief does not make it go away.
Yeah.
I have a human brain. It's going to be there. Sometimes it's going to be there. It might be there forever. And so my job is to become aware of when it starts to pop up. It's not 100% foolproof thing, but here's the thing. I know that's my limiting belief. And when I can bring the unconscious to the conscious, it gives me the ability of changing it. And so when I can say, oh, I know this limiting belief, I know that it's telling me that I've got to work more. It's telling me that I've got to give more. It's telling me that I have to wait. This could be my limiting belief speaking. And understanding that gives me the ability of now making a decision if I'm going to act in congruence with it or not. And so just becoming aware of it is always the first step to it, right? Is becoming aware, like, hey, this is happening again. And this is something that's human. I'm not going to beat myself up about it. It's something that like has been happening for 43 years of my life. Knowing that it's here is not going to make it instantly go away. But then having different strategies that I use to get past it. How I do that is I write affirmations.
Okay.
So what I do is basically what a limiting belief to me is like a thought that you think over and over so many times that it makes its way into the subconscious mind. And so what I do is I consciously counteract it by saying an affirmation that not only makes logical sense, but it reminds me of like what the truth is that I want to believe. And I will say that in the morning time. So that way I remember that when it comes up through the day, oh, wait, no, this is what I truly believe. This is like my true north. And so I will find and write affirmations around these limiting beliefs. And I structure them in a way so that when I say it, it gives me the emotion in my body and it gets me to really show up. And when those times come, it tries to throw me off. It reminds me of like where true north is.
So there's something really cool here because some people might think that affirmations, this is kind of woo-woo and things like that. So I kind of want to touch on that, but you said something really powerful, and that is with the affirmation that you cultivate that emotion, you feel it in your body. Is there a limit to what an affirmation can do for you, or what would you say to someone who suggests that an affirmation is kind of a waste of time, or it's woo-woo, or I shouldn't bother doing it?
I would say that I would agree with them because I've done them wrong many, many times in the past. So an affirmation is not, hey, I'm a lion or I'm a tiger or something like that doesn't spur any emotion in you. What I do as a life coach is I want to pull out like your purpose, your potential, your heart from you, like what is really important or meaningful. And I want to use that in an affirmation so it generates the feeling that you need to take the right actions. Because if I just say, hey, Coach John, you're incredible, and you don't believe it, it is useless. It is not going to help you. So you have to have an affirmation that's like tied to you, but that it also feels believable. Because when it feels believable and you're like, yes, this is it, then it will get you to take those actions. So let me give an example. So if you're struggling, like let's say you're struggling with, exercising and eating healthy, right? And you're like, no, like exercising and eating healthy is important or meaningful to me because if I'm able to do this, not only am I going to model the behavior for my kids, I'm going to be able to play with them more. I'm going to be able to live longer. I'm going to be able to like have more energy at end of watch. And so you now compile all of these things of why it's important or meaningful to you, right? And so you write an affirmation. And I would say something like, because my family is so important to me, I want to have the energy that I need to have to show up and like literally play with my grandkids when they're here. I exercise, I work out, I eat healthy every single day because that is what I want to model the behavior for my kids so that when they grow up, they don't have to deal with what I'm dealing with. And so you would write something that's based in your own words, or I would pull out of you if I'm coaching you. And then you'd be able to just go, okay, I'm going to read this every day. So when you read it, when you wake up and you're like, should I work out or not? You're going to be like, wait, I have an opportunity to model the right behavior, not only for my kids, but to show up like more energized, more clear, because I know I feel more confident when I exercise, and I will not give that up today. I'm going to exercise. And when you do that, it's like this muscle you build, right? It's that confidence muscle. You're like, that was awesome. Tomorrow I'm going to wake up. Guess what? I'm probably going to feel the same way, but I now have that direction that I need to go so that it gets me to go out of bed.
Yeah, that's a beautiful clarification there because I think there's a misunderstanding around affirmations, and I say they do need to be grounded in reality. They want to be aspirational, yes, where they they drive you to aspire to be your best self, but they must be grounded in reality, because it's no amount of affirmation is going to make me a professional golfer or a professional basketball player, you
Me
know?
neither.
Right. And so I think this is why some people will get disillusioned with this process of life coaching and personal growth and things like this, because they go, it's all a bunch of nonsense. I'm like, yeah, if your affirmations are something that's not grounded in reality, they are going to be nonsense, because they're not going to inspire you, because you know in your heart they're not true. So by grounding in reality, you know it to be true. You touched on scheduling time for yourself. I
Yeah.
love that. Here's why I love that, and I'd like to maybe unpack that just a little bit as well. We live in a world where we can fill 24 hours a day. And we have devices in our pockets and laptops and computers and TV. We have access to so much digital stimulation. We could never consume it in a lifetime. There's more stuff put on YouTube in a single day than a human being could consume in a lifetime. That's the kind of content, And so it might sound weird, or like, what is wrong with me that I have to actually schedule time? But I think there's two things that kind of dictate or demonstrate our priorities. One is our bank account, and two is our calendar. Those two things. And when I put something on my calendar, it now is a priority to me. And so I put time on my calendar to spend time with my son, or to spend time with my wife, and so on. Because if I don't, I know my tendency is to fill that time. And so how do you feel about scheduling?
100% what you just said right now. So if it is something that deserves your time and attention, it should be on your schedule. Like I put playing video games with my son. I put everything on there. And here's the thing, like I was coaching somebody one time, and I was like, we were kind of talking about like, hey, I like to have a better connection with my wife. And I'm like, okay, what does that look like? Right. I don't like goals that are just like, I want to be able to, and he's like, well, I want to be able to spend like this amount of time with my wife. I want to be able to text her during the day. Like while I'm at work, like just immediately remember and say, hey, I want to text her that I love her or whatever. I'm like, okay, pull out your calendar and write it in your calendar. He's like, but isn't it going to be weird if I put like in my calendar at this time in the morning, text my wife that I love her? Shouldn't I just remember that? I'm like, no, with all the stuff you have going on, no. Like, I hope that she sees that, because you're going to be like, this is how much I love you, because I really want to make sure that I express myself, especially in those times when I'm the most busy, because you are the most important thing to me in the world. Tell me how she's going to get upset with that, right? And so everything has to have a time, right? If you don't have time for your downtime, your life's going to make you have time for your downtime, but it's not going to be at your disposal. It's going to happen to you by default, right? And so instead I'm like, okay, when I look at the week, I have my work time, I have business time, I have family time, I have time with my wife, at least 30 to 45 minutes of undivided attention with just her by herself every night, no matter how busy it gets. And then I have time for myself. I have time just to like play video games. I have time to just like do things that I love to do, because I know that really fills my cup. And the next day I'm really back on my A game. Right. And so realizing that is important and putting it on my schedule has been really a game changer for me.
Yeah. And for me, I use a habit tracker called Loop. And so I have about 24 things listed on there, which sounds like a lot of things, but I've actually stacked quite a few things together. And my mornings, like, it's funny, I don't usually start work before 10 a.m. I probably shouldn't admit that. But there's a reason for that, because my mornings are like, we have morning snuggle time. So we bring our son into our bed. He sleeps at night in the bassinet or whatever, but we bring him into the bed and we snuggle with him, and we interact with him, and we interact with each other. It's so important that I invest that time into my family first. Then I'll go and I'll have a light workout, maybe break a bit of a sweat. I like to have a cold shower every day. It's just kind of this thing that I do. I'm trying to build up my resilience. It's a way that I make myself uncomfortable every day. And so that's kind of something that I do. And so I just love that idea that, like, if it's a priority, it's going to be on your schedule. And we don't schedule to become a slave to it, but it gives structure to our day, and it gives us a sense of direction. I write out my schedule as well, and nothing ever goes according to plan, or very rarely things go according to plan, but plan anyways, because if you don't, it's never going to happen.
Right.
Now, I love this phrase, because your illustrious press secretary uses this all the time. Circle back. You talked about being in a mastermind, and because you were in this group environment of supportive people, it elevated you to being a better man, a better human being, because you were in the presence of other human beings who were holding you to account and encouraging you to do that. Why do you think it's so important that if we want to better ourselves, that we connect ourselves to other human beings?
Wow. So have you ever read the book Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill?
I've read elements of it. I think I read a book
Yeah.
summary, but I didn't read the entire thing.
Yeah, it's one of those books where like every other personal development book since has revolved around it. So like since the 1930s, they understood the power of who you surround yourself with, right? Jim Rohn says you're the average of the five. Everybody said that repeatedly over and over and over again. I mean, you're the average income, you're the average parent, you're the average spouse, you're the average. So we all know that like the people that we surround ourselves with influence us, either influences the positive or influence us in the negative. And so like really making sure that you understand that you have a very clear-cut way of actually elevating yourself by putting yourself in a room that also wants to be elevated. Because a lot of times, like we kind of like just let that happen by default. I know I did. It was like whoever was in the squad car next to me, whoever was on my watch, or whoever was my classmate at the academy, they now instantly became my best friends. And I would start to emulate some of the stuff that they did, which means poker night, a lot of extra overtime, like not really like taking our family seriously, not really taking our health seriously, going to eat crappy foods. And it was crazy what happened when I just like literally switched watches or switched partners. It was like, now I was looking for more things to do. Now I was like eating healthier foods. Now I was getting exercise. And it was like, how did this happen? And it's because there's this power, there's this influence, right? It's like this social thing. It's, you know, some people call it peer pressure, which obviously could be negative, but it could also be like, hey, when you're around other people who are striving, who are growing, who want to become better, and they're learning too. Here's the thing. There's something called exponential growth when you're in a mastermind. That's mean you're around like other people who are like growing, who are reading, who are trying to become better, who I mean, you just asked me, hey, can you share that list of questions with me? Right? That's what it's all about. It's like, hey, I have this list of questions that's going to take your marriage to the next level. Do you want to share it with you? You're like, yeah, let's do that. Like, you probably wouldn't just do that with some random friend or a random person that you're just like around, or a family member, right? It's because like that would be kind of awkward, right? But if you're in this group and you know that everybody's growing, you know that everybody believes in each other, then they're not going to beat each other up. Like if somebody doesn't show up, they're going to be like, dude, it's all right that you didn't do that, but you got to show up. You know, we totally believe in you. When you have other people that you could ride on their coattails of belief, it exponentially helps you to grow. Yeah. So if you want to make your life easier, if you want to achieve something in a specific area, hang out with other people who are either heading in that direction or they're a few steps ahead of you, right? Yeah. You have that group, it will naturally get you to take upon those actions, and it'll be much easier than you think it is.
And, you know, I think people are afraid to step into groups like this where there's people that are more successful than them. I think because they fear that these people are going to look down on them because they haven't achieved that same level of success. And I've never found that to be true. I find that people who I meet that are more successful, like they're very encouraging. They're very supportive. They're like, yeah, I wasn't born with this level of success. And we actually innately, like, I think this is why being a coach is so awesome, because I really say like, we're a few steps down the road on a path someone else would like to travel. And so we can help them navigate that because we've seen it before. It's not about I'm better than you. It's I'm at a different stage than you. I've taken a few more steps than you. The last question I kind of want to ask you was, how long did it take you to lose 100 pounds?
Oof. After I got serious, probably about 8 or 9 months. Yeah. But like I said, I was going up and down and up and down. So maybe about 8 or 9 months. And I'm happy to say that was the last time that I lost it. And what's funny is like, it wasn't the outside that changed. Like we talked about, it was the inside. And when I could take full control over it, are there times where I go up in a couple pounds and then down a couple pounds? Absolutely. That's a part of normal living. But like having that total control, like gives me the freedom to stay where I want to stay. And I like being 43 in the best shape of my life. I'm like, how in the world, like what would have happened if I started earlier, right? Everybody, James Clear had a post about that. He says, nobody ever wished they started later. Everybody wished they started sooner. And I'm like, that is 100% right. Like, no matter what, whenever you have success, you're like, man, I wish I would have started sooner. And I don't like to beat myself up, but I'm like, man, it's crazy that, you know, I had to wait until I was 33 to get started. But now that I'm 43 and I'm in the best shape of my life, I just want to just tell everybody that it doesn't matter where you are. It doesn't matter like where you are in your life. It doesn't matter like any of those things that we kind of like get our limiting beliefs, get us to not take action. It doesn't matter. You can become better. Don't stop the comparison game. That never works, right? Yeah. But you can always get better. As long as you have focus on, I can become better, then you will be able to have that potential of becoming better.
Yeah. Well, this has been an amazing conversation, and we could definitely keep this going, but let's sort of bring things together. So what are your final thoughts, if there's something you would like to share, just to encourage people who feel like they're stuck and they want to create change? What's something they can take home?
Oof. Small actions, like you said, very small actions. Like, what is something that you can do that might seemingly insignificant, that is one step in the direction of where you want to go? Like, that's all you have to do. It's like baby steps, baby steps, baby steps. And of course, finding somebody who can like be your cheerleader and be your coach, be the person on your side. All right. Now, I'm not talking about your family or your friends who are going to be like, oh,
Yeah.
it's okay. Like, you had a tough day yesterday. Just feel free to, but no, somebody else who like really believes in you. Like, of course, you got Coach John here. Find somebody like him
Yeah.
who's going to believe in you. And that is like, I can't tell you how great it feels to get that affirmation of like, hey, you know what? He believes in me. So I know that this is possible then too. And just take those baby steps, guys. It's not as hard as anybody makes it out to be. It's
Yeah.
not impossible for you either. That is your limiting beliefs. That's your brain. It's the way it's supposed to go. It's trying to get you stuck. It's trying to get you back into the comfort zone. But you guys know that, right?
Yeah.
We brought that unconscious now to the conscious. So now you have the ability of changing it.
I love saying my coaching superpower is X-ray vision, and what I mean by that is I see potential in people that they don't see in themselves.
Yes.
That's the most amazing thing about when I start to work with someone. I think you probably feel the same way. Someone comes into you,
Yep.
they're filled with limiting beliefs. I can't do this, and so on. And I just look at them and go, "Oh my gosh, look at the potential. This is exciting."
Yep.
It's what gets me out of bed. It's why I love to do what I do. So you have a book that's going to be coming out. Is the book yet released yet, or is there a release date for it?
No, it's going to be released sometime in December. It's called Mastering Your Life Through Self-Coaching.
Yeah. And so I want to show people where they can connect with you, and they can actually get a free preview chapter of the book. Can they not at this current time?
Yes, they
So
can.
and if someone is like, man, this Marc guy is amazing. He's shared so many nuggets of wisdom. I want to get in touch with him. What's the best way for them to connect with you?
So I also have a podcast called the Leo Family Fitness Podcast. And then if you look for me, Marc Hildebrand, I'm on Instagram, Facebook, all that good stuff. But any way that I could ever help out anybody, please don't hesitate to reach out. Definitely grab a copy of that preview chapter. It talks a lot about taking ownership, which is the first step to change, is like really having the understanding that once you own it, even if like it's a bunch of negativity and a bunch of BS and a bunch of stuff that's gotten you to where you are, once you own it, you have the ability of changing it.
Yeah. And that's so powerful there, because that's like stepping out of victimhood and into your power. Ownership is exactly what it is. So, all right, man, I want to say thank you so much for everything you've shared today. You have so much wisdom to share. It's an amazing conversation. And I think for everybody else that's been watching, they're greatly appreciative as well. Thank you for your time today.
Oh yeah, for sure, John. And to be honest, like I want to say, like I appreciate and I want to acknowledge and appreciate you, because I know how much energy and effort it takes to put some stuff like this together. I thank you for being on my show. Like you have a ton of knowledge and information that you're putting out there, and I know how hard it is to put all this stuff together. But you're making a difference, and I appreciate you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. And thank you everybody for tuning in, and stay tuned for another show like this next week.